Welcome to the research desk. I mean, imagine the largest library on Earth, right? The architecture is breathtaking.
And massive.
Right, just unbelievable scale. The collection contains almost every single piece of recorded human knowledge, and the volume of incoming material is growing, exponentially by the hour. But there is a catastrophic flaw.
There's no card catalog.
None. There is no Dewey Decimal System at all. The books are simply dumped into a massive, disorganized pile on the floor in the center of the room.
Which is exactly what the internet was in 1997.
Yes, exactly. We possessed the text, but we completely lacked the map to navigate them. So today, we are looking at the company that drew that map and, well, more importantly, the company that is currently facing the total mutation of its core product.
The Google machine.
Right. I look at Google and I see the absolute pinnacle of business elegance. I see an unmatched financial and physical infrastructure engine. This is a system that did something completely unprecedented in the history of commerce. It successfully turned raw human intent into the ultimate, infinitely scalable advertising market.
See, I look at this entirely through the lens of pattern recognition. I do not just see an elegant business machine operating in a vacuum. I see a story that mirrors other systemic choke points across the global economy.
Choke points?
Absolutely. The very mechanisms of Google's early triumph, the default distribution networks, the behavioral choke points, the frictionless translation of keywords into closed markets, those became both its compounding loop and its ultimate antitrust vulnerability. We are tracing the direct line from an academic prototype in a Stanford dorm room to the establishment of a global monopoly.
A monopoly that is now arguably under siege.
Exactly. What we are seeing right now, this massive shift toward an artificial intelligence assistant layer, it threatens the foundational architecture of the search box itself. The interface is changing. The monopoly is under extreme stress.
You think the whole model is breaking?
I think the transition from traditional information retrieval to generative synthesis is not just a feature update, It is a fundamental threat to the way intent is organized, monetized, and ultimately controlled.
Well, to understand the stakes of this transition, we really have to establish one fundamental truth about how this empire was built. Google did not start by knowing more about people than its competitors.
Right. They didn't have user profiles back then.
No, they started by knowing more about pages. By solving the mathematical structure of the web, they accidentally captured the most valuable real estate in the history of capitalism, which is the precise moment just before human choice.
Let us examine that profound blind spot of the early internet. Because in the mid-90s, the landscape of the web was expanding far faster than anyone could chart it.
You had Yahoo, right, which began essentially as a human-edited directory.
Literally David Filo and Jerry Yang sitting in a trailer.
Yes, attempting to categorize human knowledge by hiring editors, real human beings, to organize links into predefined folders.
It was a strictly ontological approach. They honestly believed the internet could be organized like a traditional corporate filing cabinet.
Which is wild to think about now. Human knowledge scales exponentially, while human categorization scales linearly. The model was just destined to break under the sheer weight of new websites.
So the competitors who realized that human editors could not scale, well, they turned to software. But their software possessed a fatal flaw.
You're talking about AltaVista and Lycos?
Right, attempting to crawl pages at scale to build massive indices. And then you had Excite and InfoSeek building their engines entirely around basic text matching. The entire industry was treating the web merely as a document database.
Just a flat file of text.
Exactly. The foundational logic was that counting words equated to relevance. If a user searched for the word bicycle, the engine would scan its database and simply find the page that used the word bicycle the highest number of times.
The term frequency metric.
Right, which immediately incentivized terrible behavior.
It created a deeply manipulative keyword stuffing game between publishers and machines.
Oh, absolutely. Webmasters realized the algorithm lacked any qualitative judgment, so they began hiding text in the background color of their sites.
A website selling diet pills would place the word cardiologist 10,000 times in white text on a white background at the bottom of the page.
The user could not see it, but the web crawler logged those 10,000 instances.
And suddenly, The diet pill scam is ranking as the #1 result for serious medical inquiries. It was a complete race to the bottom in terms of quality.
The search engines were entirely blind to context, blind to authority, and actively losing the war against spam. The utility of the internet was degrading by the day.
But that blind spot was sitting in plain sight. It just required a completely different academic discipline to see it.
Network theory.
Exactly. Larry Page and Sergey Brin at Stanford did not look at the web as a filing cabinet of disconnected documents. They looked at the web and saw a hidden social graph. They saw a citation network.
This is a profound concept that requires some careful unpacking.
Let's unpack it. In academia, the importance of a research paper is not judged by how many times the author uses a specific buzzword. It is judged by how many other highly respected papers cited.
A citation is a signal of peer review.
Right. And Page and Brin applied this exact logic to the internet. They understood that every single hyperlink, whether it was placed there by a university administrator, a weekend hobbyist building a fan page, or a major newspaper, was a small, deliberate act of human judgment.
It was a transfer of reputation from one node to another.
Yes, a link is essentially a vote of confidence, permanently encoded into the architecture of the web.
That insight completely changed the math of information retrieval. They hypothesized that the structure of the web itself contained the answer to the relevance problem. They just needed the computational power to read the structure.
And think about this for a second. We are talking about the foundation of a trillion-dollar empire here. They did not start with a business plan.
No!
They didn't have an advertising model or monetization strategy mapped out on a whiteboard. They started in a dorm room with a project called Backrub.
Still a terrible name.
An awful name. But in their 1998 academic paper titled The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine, they described Google merely as a prototype.
Just an academic exercise.
Right. But consider the staggering scale of what they built just to prove that academic thesis. It was a full-text and hyperlinked database of at least 24 million pages.
Wait, 24 million pages in 1998?
Yes. At the time, processing the structural relationships between 24 million interconnected nodes was an almost unthinkable computational achievement.
They had to build custom hardware just to house the hard drives, didn't they?
Exactly. They were mapping the nervous system of human knowledge in a dorm.
The beauty of that prototype lies in the profound asymmetry of their information edge. The algorithm they developed, PageRank, was a recursive measure of importance.
It was a voting system.
But crucially, not every vote counts the same. This is where the mathematical elegance actually resides. If a highly authoritative site, such as a major government domain or a prestigious university, links to you, that transfers significantly more reputation than 100 links from unknown, newly created spam sites.
But how does the algorithm know that the university is authoritative in the first place?
Because other authoritative sites link to the university. The algorithm calculates the eigenvector centrality of the entire network simultaneously. It mathematically traces the probability that a random surfer clicking links infinitely would end up on any given page.
Which means they were extracting value from a system they did not even have to build.
That is the ultimate structural advantage. Google did not own the web. They did not pay a single publisher to create this massive link graph.
No content acquisition costs.
None. They did not have to ask a single user to manually label the quality of a site or fill out a survey. They simply extracted a brilliant, hidden signal from a public structure that the entire world was building for free.
The data existed out in the open, but the interpretation of that data did not.
Exactly. They captured the value of the internet's collective judgment without having to subsidize its creation. This allowed them to provide search results that felt almost magical compared to Alta Vista. The relevance was immediately apparent to anyone who used the search box.
But, that reliance on public structure created an immediate internal pressure regarding trust.
How so?
Well, the search engine could only maintain its authority if the public implicitly believed in the integrity of its results. The moment you introduce money into a system based on pure academic relevance, you risk poisoning the well.
Oh, right. The advertising conflict.
Exactly. If we look at the 2004 Founders IPO letter, Larry Page and Sergey Brin explicitly stated that their search results were not sold for payment. They drew a hard, unyielding line between the organic results and the commercial interests of the company.
And this was not merely idealism. It was not just a clever public relations strategy wrapped in a "don't be evil" slogan. It was a structural requirement for their survival.
The entire mechanism relied on the search box remaining a trusted instrument of intent.
Right. If users ever believed that the answers were biased by financial transactions, the magic would vanish. The user would stop asking the most intimate, vulnerable, and specific questions.
The data stream would just dry up.
The behavioral feedback loop would shatter. The organic results had to remain completely pure so that the commercial real estate adjacent to them could become infinitely valuable. They had to convince the user that the primary service was objective retrieval and that the advertisements were merely helpful, clearly labeled suggestions on the periphery.
And that strict separation of church and state allowed them to execute a paradigm shift in commerce. The launch of AdWords in the year 2000 completely rewired the global economy.
It changed everything.
Before AdWords, the entire advertising industry operated on a broadcast model. You bought a television spot, a billboard, or a magazine page, and you paid based on cost per thousand impressions.
You paid to expose your message to a broad demographic audience in bulk.
Exactly. You just hoped that a tiny fraction of that audience might happen to be interested in your product at that specific moment. It was fundamentally a game of demographic guesswork and massive waste.
AdWords changed the fundamental physics of advertising. Google began turning keywords into granular markets. They shifted the model from cost per impression to cost per click.
You only paid if the user actually engaged.
Because they began selling granular moments of intent. A query like running shoes is a solid commercial signal, but a query like enterprise cybersecurity pricing is a hyper-specific, massively valuable statement of immediate corporate need.
What Google did was sell the right to compete for live, explicit statements of desire at the exact moment those desires were typed into a keyboard.
They bypassed demographic profiling entirely.
Straight to capturing explicit demand. They built an automated auction that ran millions of times a day, matching businesses with customers exactly when the customer was asking for the business.
But the transition into that auction model carried an immense risk of destroying the very trust they had built.
Right, the average selection problem.
Exactly. If you implement an auction where the sole criteria is the highest financial bid, you inevitably hand the keys to your platform over to the worst actors in the economy.
Because the businesses with the highest profit margins are often scams, counterfeiters, or really aggressive lead generators.
Right. If Google had simply ranked the advertisements by whoever was willing to pay the most money per click, a user searching for critical medical information might see an advertisement for a completely unrelated, high-margin scam simply because that advertiser outbid a legitimate hospital.
That would have permanently damaged the credibility of the search box.
It would have ruined it entirely.
Which is why the mechanics of the auction were specifically designed to neutralize that exact risk.
Wait, they didn't just sell to the highest bidder? That is the most counterintuitive and brilliant part of the AdWords machine.
They forced relevance into the pricing model.
Yes, by inventing the quality score. A competitor's high bid could actually lose to a lower bid if the lower bid was deemed more relevant to the user.
The formula is essentially bid multiplied by quality score equals ad rank.
Exactly. Let us detail the big three components of ad quality. First, the expected click-through rate.
Based on historical data. Right. The system algorithmically predicted how likely a user was to click an ad based on massive amounts of historical behavioral data. If a specific ad historically received very few clicks, the system determined it was likely unhelpful and penalized it.
Makes sense.
Second, ad relevance. It mathematically measured how tightly the text of the ad matched the user's specific query.
And the third?
Third is the landing page experience. The system evaluated whether the website the ad led to was actually useful, fast, and functionally relevant to the promise made in the ad. If an advertiser bought a keyword but sent the user to a slow, deceptive website, their quality score plummeted.
So they mathematically penalized irrelevant advertisers, forcing them to pay exponentially more for the same placement, while rewarding highly relevant advertisers with significantly lower costs.
Saw highly measurable immediate demand.
This created a cycle where Google earned more money not by showing the most intrusive advertisement, but by making the commercial answers feel incredibly close to organic relevance. The system aligned the financial incentives of the advertiser with the informational needs of the user.
All while Google acted as the toll collector.
And the scale of that toll collection demands absolute attention. I mean, if we examine Alphabet's 2025 Form 10K, we are looking at a financial reality that defies standard corporate gravity.
The numbers are staggering.
Alphabet reported $402.8 billion in total revenue. Over 70% of that immense figure is generated purely from online advertising.
Just incredible.
The search and other revenue segment alone hit $224.5 billion. Google services produced $139.4 billion in operating income in 2025 alone. This is an engine of capital generation unlike anything in modern history.
But, the genius is not just in the collection of the cash. It is in the reinvestment gear.
Where did all that capital go?
This immense capital did not simply pool into idle profits. It was weaponized to build the physical and digital infrastructure of the modern internet. They deployed billions to build sprawling global data centers. They laid massive undersea fiber optic cables to connect continents.
The hardware layer.
Yes, they designed custom silicon, the tensor processing units, specifically optimized for their machine learning workloads. They funded the relentless web crawlers mapping the ever-expanding internet continuously.
They also built the endpoints, though. They built the Chrome browser and the Android mobile operating system,
which was a brilliant reinvestment strategy designed to ensure the fastest, most reliable, and most frictionless user experience possible. By controlling the browser and the mobile operating system, they ensured that the underlying infrastructure of the web was optimized for speed.
because speed equals queries.
Exactly. When the internet is fast, people search more. When people search more, the advertising engine captures more intent. They optimize the environment so that all traffic naturally flowed back to their search box.
I have to stress test this exact distribution model.
Okay, go ahead.
What you describe as brilliant reinvestment to make the product easier to use, the judicial system has now legally defined as an unlawful lock-on primary access points.
The antitrust case.
Let us examine the August 2024 Federal District Court ruling. The court unequivocally held that Google unlawfully monopolized general search services and general search text ads. This is where the elegant machine hit the antitrust wall.
Well, the premise of the antitrust case focuses heavily on the default agreements. Google paid massive sums to device manufacturers, most notably Apple, to be the default search engine on their devices.
$20 billion a year, roughly.
Right, but Google argued, and I believe correctly, that they were simply competing for distribution. Apple chose Google because Google provided the superior product. Users could change the default search engine in the settings menu at any time with just a few taps.
A few taps that nobody makes.
If Bing or DuckDuckGo offered a better experience, the barrier to switching was incredibly low.
The barrier to switching is low in theory, but in behavioral reality, the friction of default settings is an insurmountable wall. 99% of users do not navigate into the secondary settings menus of their smartphones to change the default search engine.
People stick to the default.
The default setting dictates behavior at a population scale. Google understood this intimately, which is why they were willing to pay Apple upwards of $20 billion a year just to remain the default on iOS devices. But the core issue the court identified goes far deeper than just behavioral friction.
It always comes back to the data.
Exactly. The core issue is denied scale.
You are referring to the data moat.
Rivals did not just fail because they lacked a team of smart engineers or a mathematically sound algorithm. They failed because they were systematically denied the query volume required to ever improve their algorithms to a competitive level.
Because search requires scale to learn.
Search is a unique technical beast. You do not build a perfect search engine in a laboratory and then release it to the public. The algorithm requires constant interaction to learn. It requires rare, hyper-specific long-tail queries. It requires strange spelling errors.
Geographical nuances.
It requires local geographical patterns, yes. It requires massive amounts of adversarial spam data to learn what to filter out. Most importantly, it requires continuous click feedback. When a user searches for a term, skips the first two results and clicks the third, the system learns.
So a search engine with too few users is like a financial market with too few trades.
Perfect analogy.
The price discovery never gets deep enough.
The court and the Department of Justice successfully argued that Google's exclusionary agreements made Google the preset standard on billions of devices, which actively denied competitors the raw data scale needed to survive.
Bing couldn't catch up.
Bing could not catch up because Bing could not secure the user volume necessary to train its machine learning models to parity. The distribution lock ensured the data advantage, and the data advantage ensured the superior product. It was a closed loop.
And the courts decided to intervene?
We have to detail the September 2025 remedies decision. The court rejected the immediate structural divestiture of Chrome and Android. They did not break the company into separate pieces.
Which was a massive relief for Alphabet.
However, they imposed severe behavioral remedies. These include strict limits on exclusive contracts related to the distribution of Search, Chrome, and certain artificial intelligence products. The very distribution network that fueled the compounding loop is now legally constrained. The mechanism of their dominance is being dismantled by the state.
The behavioral remedies are legally significant on paper, sure, but they do not instantly dismantle the behavioral inertia of billions of human beings.
Inertia is powerful.
The physical and digital infrastructure remains intact. The muscle memory of the global population is still entirely oriented toward the Google search box. The scale they have accumulated over more than 2 decades provides a historical data advantage, a deep reservoir of user behavior, and algorithmic refinement that simply cannot be legislated away overnight.
True. The historical data is a massive asset.
Even if a competitor suddenly gains a level playing field in distribution today, they face a nearly insurmountable data deficit. Google has mapped human intent so thoroughly that the gap in quality remains massive.
The legal vulnerability might be a slow burn, but I connect that legal vulnerability directly to a much more acute technological one.
The AI threat.
The interface is shifting toward generative answer engines. This is the true mutation of the core product. We are moving away from traditional retrieval.
The 10 blue links?
The classic 10 blue links paradigm involves a user asking a question, reviewing a list of destinations, and then leaving Google to complete their task elsewhere. We are moving toward artificial intelligence synthesis.
The large language model shift fundamentally changes the user expectation.
If an AI assistant simply answers the user's question directly, compares the options internally, and completes the transaction on behalf of the user without ever generating a traditional search results page, the old, highly lucrative surface area for text ads drastically shrinks.
You're saying the ad real estate disappears.
The real estate that generates that $400 billion is disappearing into a conversational interface. Think about the mechanics of the auction we discussed earlier. It relies on a page with multiple slots for advertisements, interspersed with organic links.
Right, visual real estate.
If a user asks a generative model for the best laptop for video editing, and the AI just tells them the answer and offers to buy it, where do the sponsored links go? How do you run a multi-participant auction for a single synthesized voice response?
It becomes a lot harder to display options.
The fundamental architecture of their monetization requires friction. It requires the friction of choosing between links. Synthesis removes that friction, and in doing so, threatens the economic model.
Yet the financial data directly contradicts the narrative of collapse.
How so?
The market has been predicting the death of Google search at the hands of generative AI since the launch of ChatGPT. Let us look at how Google is systematically absorbing this threat right back into the machine.
Let's hear the numbers.
If we look at the Alphabet Q4 2025 earnings call, in the face of this massive AI transition, search and other advertising revenue actually rose 17% year over year to $63.1 billion in just that single quarter.
A 17% increase.
Yes. Management explicitly described AI not as a threat, but as expanding the playing field for advertisers, allowing them to capture intent in new dynamic formats.
But the format of capturing that intent has to change.
And it is changing. Sundar Pichai's July 2025 figures are definitive. AI Overviews reached 2 billion monthly users. The dedicated AI mode had over 100 million monthly active users across the US and India.
They are definitely scaling the new tech.
Furthermore, by March 2026, StatCounter still showed Google holding an 89.85% global search engine market share. The wall you are describing is not a collapse. It is a mutation.
A mid-flight redesign.
Exactly. Compare the AI transition to a toll booth operator deciding to build the highway destination themselves. They might lose the specific toll revenue of the old model, But now they own the destination. They are proving that they can integrate generative artificial intelligence directly into the search experience without sacrificing the advertiser intent that fuels the entire machine. They are adapting the auction to synthesize answers while still providing commercial pathways.
Let me map Google's position against other monopolies of intent, because the pattern recognizer sees a broader view here that transcends just the quarter-over-quarter earnings.
All right, map it out.
Compare Google to Amazon, Visa, Bloomberg, or even TSMC. Amazon owns the shopping query. They know exactly what you want to buy before you buy it.
Right.
Visa and MasterCard own the transaction authorization. They sit at the choke point of global capital exchange. Bloomberg owns the professional financial lookup. They control the data terminal that drives market decisions.
And TSMC?
TSMC owns the manufacturing feedback loop between design intent and physical process reality. They control the choke point of advanced silicon.
So the common thread is that they control the bottleneck of a specific type of human or corporate desire.
Exactly. The universal rule across all these monopolies is this: valuable data is not random digital exhaust. It is not passive scrolling on a social media feed. It is explicit, timely, repeatable decision data.
Decision data.
Decision data has 4 specific properties. First, it is explicit. A search query tells you exactly what the user wants in their own words. Second, it is timely. A person searching for tax software in March is a highly lucrative lead, near the point of purchase.
Third,
it is repeatable. The system captures billions of these decisions, letting the platform learn seasonality, geographic trends, and pricing elasticity. Fourth, it can be monetized, without immediately charging the user.
and Google has historically owned the most upstream version of this decision data. They capture the intent before it ever routes to Amazon or Visa.
But as we shift from a search box to an AI assistant layer, the nature of what a user delegates fundamentally changes. It is no longer just typing best mortgage rates and looking at links.
It becomes a task.
Right. It is saying to an agent, find me the best mortgage rate, compare it against my current financial profile, and initiate the application. That delegated intent is infinitely more valuable.
And harder to capture if you don't own the system level.
Exactly. And there is no guarantee that the company that organized the web's documents is structurally positioned to capture that new agentic intent layer before a dedicated AI hardware or software competitor intercepts it at the device operating system level. If the operating system handles the request natively through its own AI agent, the user never even reaches the Google search interface. The intent is intercepted before the toll booth.
That brings us to a final convergence on the overarching lesson of this analysis. The greatest information businesses in history do not simply aggregate generic data. They capture and own the exact moment before human choice.
The moment of intent.
Yes. As artificial intelligence fundamentally transitions the user interface from a passive search box to an active, agentic action box, a system that actually completes delegated tasks rather than just pointing toward potential solutions, the nature of human intent becomes even more intimate and complex.
Much more complex.
Google's ultimate advantage has never just been its search algorithm. It has been its unparalleled ability to monetize intent without violating user trust. The company that can facilitate this new wave of agentic action seamlessly, preserving trust while building a new commercial marketplace around delegated tasks, well, they will inherit the mantle of the ultimate intent machine. The stakes have never been higher, but Google's institutional capacity to navigate structural shifts has been proven over 2 decades.
And that leaves us with the lingering question that will define the next decade of digital capitalism. Google successfully organized the web, creating the most profitable business engine in modern history. But can it successfully organize delegated intent before another platform intercepts that request?
That is the real test.
The advantage is migrating. It is shifting away from the old interface of 10 blue links and toward the new frontier of the action box. The history of information monopolies tells us that the edge always migrates eventually. The question is whether Google can mutate its core architecture fast enough to catch the very intent it taught the world to express.
This is the Research Desk officially signing off.